You don't have to talk to me. Just please find someone you can talk to, okay? Kenma managed to sneak in without anyone noticing. He almost thought he would manage to put on makeup before anyone could see the bruises, but just as he opened the boxes and lifted the brush to his face, the bathroom door opened, revealing a very tired-looking Akashi. His eyes widened for a short moment before drifting to the makeup. Why are you... Is this a prank? He sounded hopeful, and Kenma felt the relief wash over him as he nodded. Sure, you convinced me to do it. He gave it his best to make the lie believable. Akashi's eyes narrowed as he looked at the blonde. Kenma could see his hands trembling and heard his shaky breath. The guilt ate him up from the inside. He didn't want this. Akashi looked terrified, even though he tried his best to compose himself after the initial shock. Kenma wanted to avoid all of this. It reminded him all too much of the recent events, the horror on their faces when he explained himself in the hospital after falling from the kitchen counter, the utter distress and worry. He never wanted to see that again. Never should he be the reason for their suffering, but here he was. His own heart was racing, and he felt a sudden tension building up in his muscles as he clenched the sink and brushed tighter. And with that, welcome to today's video, or in other words, the what if part to the pretend to get beat up prank, kind of, for BokuAkaKuroKen. It's the second part, and again, I would advise you to watch the Pretend to Get Beat Up original series before for context. And now, let's see what happens. It was as if Akashi's sudden appearance had broken him out of his tunnel vision. A sudden wave of panic washed over him, and he forcefully shoved it down. The moment he would focus on something other than hiding, reality would crash onto him, and he couldn't allow that just yet. Kenma? I'm fine. I will wash it off as you said. I'm sorry. He cursed himself with a slight tremble accompanying his words. Suddenly, Akashi closed the distance between them with determined steps. His brows furrowed and the worried crease appeared between them. What are you? Gentle fingers brushed the golden strands of hair from his face, exposing the tears glistening in his eyes and developing bruises on his neck. He ought to stop him, back away, grab his hand, or tell him to stay where he was, had been, but he couldn't. This felt like one of these highly complicated Mario levels with enemies attacking from each side, and too much to look at until the entire screen resembled an incoherent mesh of colors more than anything else. It was too much for his brain. In the split second he would lose focus, Kenma would lose the game. With too many sensations and thoughts crashing down on him until the program that was his brain broke, shut down. He could practically hear the game over sound as Akashi's eyes widened again while his failed to hold the tears any longer. It is not a prank. Kenma said nothing. He avoided eye contact and lowered the brush again. There was no use in it now. He should have known that he couldn't fool them. Akashi pressed his lips together in a weak attempt to regain his composure. He looked almost helpless as his eyes searched the room. It was one of the few times Kenma saw him confused, without knowing what he was supposed to do or how he should react. A hesitant hand closed around Kenma's wrist as he wordlessly guided him out of the bathroom. Dread settled in Kenma's stomach when the bedroom door came into sight. He stopped. Surprised, Akashi did too. We have to tell them. He knew that, but he didn't want to. Kenma, I don't have the words right now that I need to say. His grip tightened. No, I mean, you need help. And I think I can't give you that right now. Not all of it. Not alone. His eyes glistened with tears. He was panicking too. They can. I trust them that they can. Please, let us help you. He looked at Kenma with an almost neutral expression. Only the tears gave him away. His voice was much calmer than expected for someone who was fighting off his anxiety, but Kenma knew better than to rely on that. Akashi was never that expressive with his emotions. When he panicked, it was silent, internal. Yet, Kenma knew. The silent tugging at his arm was louder than his words as his fingers clasped around Kenma's wrist, adjusting his grip. A plea for help. A plea for Kenma to allow them to help. The blonde gulped. He followed the taller, holding his hand like a lifeline. The hallway around them seemed barely present anymore. It swayed while the shadows grew, and Kenma blinked in a desperate attempt to fight the dizziness. He almost failed to notice when Akashi sat him down at the edge of the bed and proceeded to wake up the others. His head felt suddenly so heavy. He slumped forward. Akashi approached the sleeping duo, shaking them awake and earning a disgruntled grumbling from Bokuto. Originally, they wanted to wait for Kenma to get home, but it got late, and Bokuto had training tomorrow. However, the ace didn't want to go to bed alone, and the other two failed to deny him cuddles. Who could blame them? They ended up falling asleep. Kotaro, wake up. Why? He whined, making Kota laugh in the process. The other sat up in bed and kissed the ace, who had started pouting apologetically on his cheek before doing the same to Akashi. What is it, love? He was still too sleepy to notice the gloomy mood in the room. Kenma's back. Something about the way he said it seemed to get him out of his sleep-drunken state as he looked at him, first questioningly and then with growing concern, finally noticing his shaking hands and the unnaturally tense posture. Whoa, shh, what is going on? In the blink of an eye, he changed to protective and caring upon seeing the tears in his eyes. I don't know. He tried breathing in calmly, but it turned into a sniffle. Koto's eyes wandered to the slumped-over figure at the end of the bed. He hurried to get up and walk over to the smaller. Kenma. He kneeled before him. I'm sorry. Why are you sorry? Koto reached out to him and gently cupped his cheek. His movements faltered when Kenma winced. The skin was wet. Tears. His frown deepened. Kenma still didn't answer, and with every passing second, his worry increased. With determined steps, the Tala crossed the room and searched for the light switch. He couldn't see anything in this dark. As soon as the lamp illuminated the room, he froze. The switch and the wall beside it were stained with a sticky red liquid. Immediately, he felt himself getting nauseous, his eyes widening as he looked at the same red tint on his fingers. Damn! Tetsu! Turn off the light! Bokuto whined and hid his face under the pillow. Kenma, what? He froze as his eyes fell on the former setter. Most of the damage was hidden by his hair, but Kuro didn't fail to notice the vibrant bruises on his neck, red dripping from his lip and red tinting his hairline. A band-aid was covering most of the cut more or less successfully, but the blood still stained the area. There was a thin veil of dried red down to his chin. Kuro was shaking. These wounds weren't caused by some kind of accident or clumsiness. He could still see the handprints on his neck. Within him, the rage bubbled over, only conquered by the concern and horror upon seeing his boyfriend like this. Akashi, do you think you can drive? Kenma lifted his head slightly, surprised by the sudden question. In fact, Bokuto was the only one still stubbornly hiding under the pillow and not sparing Kuro a glance. Akashi shook his head slightly. No, I'm sorry. I don't think that would be a good idea. No worries, I will drive. Get Kaoru out of bed, now. Kuro? The ember eye searched his, a silent question on his lips. Kuro looked at him tenderly and took his hand. Listen, you won't like this, but it's necessary. We will bring you to a doctor, okay? Kenma indeed looked all but happy about it. The thought made his stomach turn, but he had to admit that the time alone it took him to process the words was reason enough for concern. He hated this, but he did promise Suga. And, more importantly, he promised them. A small nod was all he could muster, but to Kuro it was more than enough. Hospital? What are you talking about? Kenma is hurt. Oh. Wait, what? He sat up straight, colliding with Akashi, who leaned over him in an attempt to coax him awake. A small groan escaped him, and he rubbed the area where the skulls collided. Nothing new with Bokuto, sadly. Oh, I'm so sorry, Kashi. I didn't mean to. It's okay, Kazara. I know. A short glance at Kuro, who carefully helped Kenma to stand up. We are all pretty stressed right now. Instantly, Bokuto's attention was back on Kenma. His eyes grew wide with shock as he started to grasp the situation. Kenma. I'm sorry. Hey, Ko. Their eyes met. The aces were raw with emotion, while Kuro seemed almost cold. Can you get the car keys, a blanket, and some ice, please? Bokuto, though he still seemed to be pretty out of it, nodded and got up. None of them bothered to change into something more appropriate. Akashi helped Bokuto gather everything they needed to make Kenma as comfortable as possible, while Kuro guided the injured back to their front door. Halfway there, Kenma stopped, but other than before, it wasn't that he was not willing to go, rather than that he couldn't. He blinked rapidly to regain orientation, and forced his eyes to focus, but it did little to nothing. Kuro next to him sounded far away, as if he wasn't right beside him. Everything was drowned out, as if he sank deeper into a dark lake with every passing second, and his grip tightened, and he pulled himself up back to his feet. He barely noticed that he sank to the ground, only held up by Kuro. Kenma still had a hard time understanding what he said, but he gritted his teeth and continued walking. He wouldn't go down that easily, not with his boyfriends by his side. Kenma, I can carry you, you know? He ignored him. Quit being stubborn, kitten. Arms closed around his waist, and within seconds, he was in the taller's arms. I hate you, Kuro. A small chuckle echoed through the hall. It wasn't much, shaky and quiet, but it was something. Come on, you never put much effort into things like this. No reason to start now. A sad but genuine smile spread on his face at Kenma's attempt of glaring at him. It quickly vanished as the noise of the door falling closed sent a wave of pain through his head, and his face scrunched up in fear. Kuro's worried frown returned. He leaned down to place a gentle kiss on Kenma's forehead, desperately wishing it was ease the pain tormenting his boyfriend. The ride to the hospital was nerve-wracking. Kuro drove while Akashi sat on the passenger seat, holding his hand and grounding them both in the process. In the back seat, Bokuto had both of his arms wrapped tightly around Kenma, making sure he was alright, keeping him awake and whispering soft reassurances mixed with quiet apologies into his ear. Kenma didn't have the energy to protest. His hat had fallen against Bokuto's chest, and he didn't even feel like he could lift so much as a finger right now. The former setup focused on fighting the nausea and his eyelids that were growing heavier by the second. Bokuto's presence helped. If he could, he would press himself even tighter against the ace to bask in his warmth and forget that the world around them even existed. Forget that they soon would arrive in a hospital where he had to leave the comforting warmth. Go. I'm here. I got you. The taller's voice was strained and his grip tightened. Kenma pressed his lips together to stop the whine as he pressed down on the bruise on his hip. He didn't care. He just wanted Bokuto to stay close to him, to hold him and never let go. The other, however, seemed to sense the sudden tension in his body and immediately decreased the pressure. I'm sorry. Kenma could feel him shaking. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words got stuck in his throat. Instead, a quiet whimper echoed through the car, and immediately the atmosphere tensed further. We're almost there. He didn't know if it was meant to reassure Kenma or himself. Kuro's grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles turned white. I got you, Kenma. I'm sorry. It'll be over soon. A few drops of tears fell from his face onto Kenma's as he kissed his temple. Go. He cried. I love you. I love you too, Kenma. So much. Sooner than anyone could wish for, Kenma found himself yet again in a hospital bed, staring at the white and lime green walls and waiting. He didn't feel pain anymore, just numb, which was probably the aftermath of the painkillers injected into his system. He just came back from the CT scan to check for any internal bleeding in the brain or something. Kenma barely understood what they told him, and while he was almost certain that this was a result of his panic plus the sensory overload that just caused him to shut down, they ordered a scan just to make sure. He was glad, or he would be in a few hours when the scans came back negative, hopefully, and he could think more clearly again. As for now, the diagnosis was concussion. He was brought back to a room to wait for the results and stay at least one night, as long as nothing unusual came up, to make sure it was nothing more serious. Kenma didn't care. As long as he could finally sleep and his boyfriends would arrive soon, he didn't care. A nurse promised to inform them, and sure enough, after a few more minutes, he heard the door open and close again as 3 pairs of footsteps entered the room. However, when he looked up, he was in for an unpleasant surprise. In walked 2 officers and the nurse. "Kozume-san?" He just blinked at them, confused, and tried to puzzle together what was happening. "We're sorry for the intrusion. I'm sure you would like to rest, but we have a few questions first." Questions? What were they talking about? Where were the others? Where were his boyfriends? He could feel himself getting antsy again. He wanted them. Nothing else mattered right now. He wanted to be with them. "Yes, based on the nature of your injuries, the hospital called us." "Where are my partners?" "You can ask them." Realistically, they couldn't. Not really. If this was about the attack, he was the only one besides Hinata and Suga who could answer their questions, since he hadn't told them anything yet. But even then, he couldn't do this alone. He needed them to be with him. The officer stepped closer and Kenma backed away as well as he could. They stopped immediately and took place at some distance. "I'm assuming you're referring to the men that brought you here. They introduced themselves as Koro Tetsuru, Akashi Keiji, and Bokuto Kotaro. Is that correct?" He nodded. "What is the nature of your relationship?" "Boyfriends. They are my boyfriends." He didn't dare to look at them directly and just threw swift glances through the veil of his hair. "All 3 of them?" Again, he nodded. "Where are they? Why aren't they here?" New tears fell from his eyes and his voice broke. "Kozume-san, your injuries were reported to us as a potential case of domestic violence or abuse." "What?" His eyes widened. "We just have a few questions, that's all. Please try to answer them truthfully." He didn't know what to say. What were they talking about? How could... "Your partner said they don't know how you got the injury. Is that true?" He stared at her with wide eyes like a deer in headlights, while his mind desperately attempted to catch up with the situation. "Where are they? I want to be with them." "We understand. Just please try and answer the questions first so that we can sort everything out." "Your partners, do they know how you got the injury? Were they involved?" "No. They could never. Tetsu, Ko, and Keiji would never hurt him. Never." "No to which of the questions? Do they know, or were they involved?" "Both." He forced the word out. It was true. He hadn't had the chance to tell them anything yet. "Can you tell us what happened?" He tried. He really did, but the words got stuck in his throat. It hurt. The more he tried to tell them, the more images from the attack came back. His hands flew up to his head and he grabbed into his hair tightly as more and more tears fell onto the blanket beneath him. He tried pulling his knees to his chest, hiding when suddenly a hand touched his, and he froze. Careful. The nurse carefully loosened his grip, which was way too close to the freshly treated laceration, and immediately stepped back afterward to give him space. Officers, I don't think it's a good idea to proceed right now. As you see, the patient needs rest. They nodded. We'll come back tomorrow. Wait! They looked at him surprised, yet alerted. My boyfriends. I want to be with my boyfriends. You have to let them in. Please. He couldn't do this without them. He needed them. The officers didn't seem all too pleased with the idea, but without further evidence, there was nothing they could do. Are you sure? He nodded. Yes. Kozume-san, if this really was one of them, you don't need to cover for them. We can help you. There's nothing you need to be afraid of. It wasn't. He was breathing heavily. Please. It wasn't. I need them. I can't do this alone. You are not alone. I want them. You can't take them from me. He knew he probably shouldn't scream at the police, or at all for that matter with the state he was in, but he was desperate. Doing this without them. He couldn't. They did nothing wrong. Without them, I wouldn't even be here. It hurt. The screaming hurt. The crying hurt, regardless of the painkillers, but their absence hurt the most. Okay, we'll tell them to come in. Thank you. It was barely audible. Rest now, we'll come back tomorrow. He gulped. He doubted that he would be any more prepared tomorrow than he was now, but at least, hopefully, they would be with him. Mere seconds after the officers had left, his partners stormed in and immediately rushed to his side. Kenma didn't waste any time and threw his arms around the first one in his reach, which just happened to be Kichi. The nurse reminded them to be careful before leaving as well. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He cried in his shirt while Akashi petted his hair gently. Next to them, Koda let himself fall into one of the chairs with a sigh. He felt exhausted and drained. I'm sorry. It's okay, Kenma. None of this is your fault. He took his hand and rubbed soothing circles over his wrist. You should rest. I'm sure you must be exhausted. Kenma shook his head against Akashi's chest. I don't want to leave you. You're not. We are right here, and we will still be when you wake up. Nothing can separate us. I promise. He gave him a small smile while Bokuto hummed in agreement. We love you, Kenma. Akashi kissed his forehead as if confirming Bokuto's statement. I love you too. The taller gently loosened Kenma's grip around his waist and guided him to lay down. Sleep. It's okay. Thanks for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed the video. So that was it for the BokuAkaKuroKen What If part. The thing is, next is obviously going to be Daisuke Woi, but with that, this alternative timeline is not completely over yet, because I wanted to really explore the butterfly effect of this situation, and I'm really having fun making these. Also, I'm sorry that I'm lately not as active when it comes to answering to comments and stuff. Again, it's a bit stressful right now, but we'll figure this out.
And I hope you have a wonderful and amazing day.